Gwatney Unplugged, hosted by Scott Romine, is brought to you by Gwatney Buick GMC at 5700 Landers Road in North Little Rock, next to Sam's Club. Call 501-945-4444 or visit GwatneyBuickGMC.com. GMC, we are professional grade.
Hey, Scott Romine here on 103.7 The Buzz. We're going to talk about probably one of my absolute favorite topics in the world, motorcycles. I've always been a motorcycle rider, and Cora Leonhardt is well on her way to becoming the first Paralyzed racer to race in Moto America. She has been riding motorcycles her entire life. How are you, Cora?
I'm doing pretty great. How about yourself?
I'm doing awesome. Where did you grow up? I'm guessing there's quite a history to this.
Yeah, so I was born in Medford, Wisconsin, and then my parents decided to start traveling when I was about 3 years old. So we pretty much traveled the central to east coast side of the United States my whole life up until I was 16 is when we decided to go ahead and settle down.
Ah, and did you settle in Georgia?
Yes, sir.
I got you. So you didn't make it to Arkansas where we're at.
No, I actually do. My adopted grandparents live there.
Really? Where are they at?
Absolutely. Up by, Shady Grove.
I don't guess I've been to Shady Grove. I have heard of that. I'm not sure exactly where that's at.
The southern side.
I got you. Okay. So
yeah.
I understand you were homeschooled most of your life. Tell us about that experience.
It was pretty fun, especially when we got into racing and whatnot. I was able to travel a lot and do it on the road, but I actually graduated when I was 14 because I pretty much just burned through all the books because we were on the road so much.
Well, were you on the road doing motorcycle things?
No, so we actually grew up doing arts and craft shows my whole life, so we worked doing that.
That's fun. I love drawing and painting, the creative outlet. It's fan. Do you do all the artistic stuff too?
No. So we actually, so they're like festivals in a sense.
I gotcha.
Yeah. So we actually started out with cutout pieces of metal that spin in the wind that you see nowadays at like Tractor Supply and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're the ones that they originated from. And then of course, everybody kind of, starts copywriting and making their own. So we had to get out of that. And we started to get into concessions. And we had built our own old-fashioned wagons that we made homemade soda for. And then we did that. And then we also made another wagon that we made food out of. So it was Southern cooking style, and it was Bubba J's Grill and Bayou Billy.
I'm sold. If you're frying stuff and giving out sodas, and I'm in. That sounds really good. Making me hungry. So you played basketball before you did motorcycles, though.
I did. So when I believe I was like 12 years old. So we would travel for 6 months and then, stay home for 6 months. And the 6 months that we were home, I actually joined a rec ball team at our local school. And I did that for about 3 years. Okay. And I was the worst player you could ever watch. I got benched dang near every game because I was that bad. But I could defend, but don't hand me the ball. It's the worst decision ever.
You probably just needed Air Jordans.
Maybe, probably. Yeah. I would have absolutely made nets all day then.
If you lived everywhere growing up, was there one place over another that you really considered to be home? Is it Georgia, I guess?
It's hard to say. I love Georgia and the people that are in it. But it's a great location for all of the tracks. So yeah, I would say that or Tennessee. I really like the mountains, so probably Tennessee more than anything.
Yeah,
but Georgia's a good second.
Oh yeah. Tell me about, because I can kind of relate to this. Your first motorcycle was a dirt bike, and it was bought off the side of the road. What was that, and was it an instant love of motorcycling?
Oh, it was an instant love. 100%. My parents decided they wanted to they thought the spontaneous moment, and my family's known for this. We'll do random things at random moments. That they bought this little dirt bike, and I absolutely shredded our yard. And 2 weeks later, we went to my first motocross race at Silver Dollar Raceway in Reynolds, Georgia, and I absolutely sucked at it. Oh my gosh, I got lapped twice. And there's only 4 laps that we did, but I got lapped twice. So I only did 2 laps. My mother and I looked at each other and we were like, I think we're in the wrong, sport here. We should probably get out of it. But I loved it so much that we gave it another try. And that's where everything really, really kicked off.
So if you're that young, are you doing the jumps and all the stuff like we see on TV?
At that time, absolutely not. But later on, our next race, yes. But that first race, no, not at all. We had no idea what we were doing. And it did started off like a mess. But that second race really kicked off because that one I came home with, I think, 2 firsts and a second.
How is that done? I mean, were there other girls racing with you, or?
There was one other woman or girl, because we were younger at the time. There was one other girl in one of our classes, but then the other 2 was just open class. So I prefer to race with the men.
I got you. Now, how long did it take you before you were really doing well and being competitive at this? I would think there's quite a learning curve.
Yes, absolutely. Motocross is a very physically and mentally demanding sport that it takes a long time to hone it. And I had a pretty late start since I was about 13 years old, compared to you could start at 4 years old. You can start riding at 3, but you start competing at 4. So I had a really late start compared to a lot of other people. And it was probably that first year. So year 2 is when we really started to pick up the pace, and it just progressed over time.
I guess it's probably something like softball, where you're taking your kids, you're traveling around just to be in the tournament or the races and all that. I mean, was your parents supportive of that? Were you traveling a little bit to do this?
So we kind of did it for fun here and there. The first couple years, we didn't really take it serious. It was up until 2015 when I was 14 at the time, and we started kicking off a little bit more. And we decided to try Loretta Lynn's, which is the amateur national. And we were hesitant because I had gotten really fast and we were doing really well at the local races. And we decided, we were like, okay, let's give it a try. Don't put our hopes up. I qualified for Loretta Lynn's.
Awesome.
That year. Yes. We finished 14th at Loretta's. And we were just hooked. I gave it almost pretty much 110% at every round, every event, every practice day, at home, on the bike. Any chance I got, I put in all of my effort to do my best, because I knew that my parents were sacrificing so much to make it happen. And it just took off from there, and we started to really get fast. And I trained at Moto X Compound in Culloden, Georgia, which is Matt Walker's track facility, which is now Ricky Carmichael owns it, and that's now where they build the Triumph bikes. And I was cool. There. Yeah, absolutely. It's a blast to see the development in their bikes, because I know some friends that work there, so it's quite cool. But no, I was there for, I would say, like 8 months, and really enjoyed it. But I didn't want to stay at a training facility, and we just went back to what we were doing, and got a lot of information from other people to help me progress, and then just did a lot of honing the skill myself.
I got you. We got to take a quick break. For the record, I qualified at Loretta Lynn's Country Buffet. I was fast enough back and forth to the catfish. They said I was in. So, it's a good thing. I'm competitive. So I still have my first little Indian 50 dirt bike. I'm 50 years old now. What was that first bike that you started on?
So that first dirt bike was a KX85 at the time. I don't remember the year model anymore, just because it's been so long now.
Well, mine's been a lot longer. I guarantee it.
Most likely, yes.
Yeah, mine was one of the last Indians sold before Indian went out, and I think it was actually a foreign bike, but it was a 50. It had Indian, tank and logos and all of that stuff, and we burned the engine up because we didn't know it was a two-stroke. So we weren't putting any oil in the engine, but I still have the bike in my garage. It's very cool. So when you start out as a street bike rider, was the dirt bike beneficial? Were there things you picked up there? Because I guess a dirt bike is a little different, than street bike. I've never been a dirt bike guy, really.
Yeah, a lot of the people that come from racing motocross from dirt bikes that transition into road racing are usually fast right off of the rip. So for me, I got my first street bike at the age of 16. I had my driver's permit, didn't have my license yet. I still had my driver's permit, and the state allowed me to actually get my motorcycle permit. So I could drive a motorcycle by myself, but I couldn't drive a car.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah, my parents trusted me more in a bike than they did a car. So that was super cool that they allowed me to do that.
I get it. I totally relate. When I was a motorcycle cop, I calculated I was doing 18,000 miles a year in the city, which is way more time than I was ever sitting in a car. So I get it, totally. When you started with a Kawasaki Ninja 250. Did you always just kind of lean towards sport bikes?
It was a good 50-50 because I never considered road racing a motorcycle up until 2020. They had gotten rid of our women's pro league in motocross, and I'm a very small, petite woman, and I was like, well, I'm not making it in the men's league. So I was like, well, let's get into road racing. So we got rid of all the dirt bikes, or not all of the dirt bikes, but all of the main stuff. So I would have room for said other bikes, because I knew they were going to multiply pretty quick, they always do. It's an addiction,
It's a drug. I've got 5, I think. It's a drug. Yeah.
I know. I'm staring at one in my kitchen currently.
Oh, that is fantastic. I've kept bikes in the kitchen. I have nothing against it. I've got a fat boy like Terminator 2, and when my kids were little, we would bring it in the living room, and my kids would watch Terminator 2 sitting on a bike exactly like Arnold's riding. And
that's awesome.
Isn't that a way to raise a young boy? I think, nothing's going to beat that.
Oh, yeah. Nothing else would beat that. No, absolutely.
So you got your first, your motorcycle license before your driver's license. You're riding the Ninja 250. And I'm a Kawasaki guy, but eventually you go over to Yamaha.
Yeah. So I acquired an R1, and I rode that for almost 2 years and loved every moment of it. I didn't have any chicken strips on it, and I was able to get really fast on it to where nobody locally could keep up. We all know what that requires.
Yeah.
So that's when I really started to look into road racing, is when I got fast on on a street bike. And I was like, okay, well, let's give this a shot. So I decided to order a KTM RC 390. And I was like, well, we'll do Junior Cup. I said, we'll just do a few local races and then sign up for Junior Cup. I was like, we'll just give it a try. And I was super excited, got all the gear, was doing a bunch of research. And yeah.
I find it interesting that you jump from a 250 to a leader bike. And for the people out there listening, a leader bike is a 1,000 cc bike. Typically, I think someone would gravitate to like a 600 or something before you get to a leader bike. But you just couldn't do all that. You had to go straight for the big one.
Oh yeah, I did that in motocross as well. I went from a a KX 100 straight to a YZ 252 stroke. I'm very known to make random big jumps from one bike to another in CC range.
What steered you towards Yamaha over, say, going to a ZX? I ride a ZX10, the Kawasaki version of what you had been riding. You've been on a Kawasaki Ninja.
Yeah. I just like the power distribution in it. It was super smooth but aggressive. They were relatively simple to work on, maintain, and I like the way that the body felt on
Right.
myself. They were super light, and they were easy to maneuver pretty much. Never had any issues.
I've heard everybody likes the sound of an R1
Oh,
compared to the
yeah.
others. There's something about the sound.
That has a chirp to it.
Is that what it
There's
is? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a chirp, and it doesn't even have to be a modified bike, like a modified R1. They just sound so good.
I get it totally. So in my experience, nothing in that sport bike world stays stock for very long. How big a deal are exhaust and tunes and all of this kind of stuff that require endless money?
So, especially getting into like modifying. So for motorcycles, you don't have to do too much to the motor as long as you do stuff to like your electronics or an exhaust. That makes the biggest difference off of the rip. Because I see a lot of people pouring money into mod motors and whatnot. And I was like, well, there's other stuff. So you got the ECU that you can modify. You can put an auto tuner in there. You can put an auto blipper or a quick shifter on it as well. But the exhaust is obviously the moneymaker because that stuff you want it to sound good. You want it to be fast, but you also want it to sound good. You want to get known for that sound.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, gosh, I've got a ZX14 and a 10 and factory, they don't sound right at all. It's like watching a movie without the sound on. It's just, it's so neutered, I guess, the restrictions of EPA. I don't know what the deal is, but they don't come out of the showroom sounding like they should sound.
Absolutely not. I remember when I got this RC and I started it up and actually rode it, I was like, this sounds like an electric bike. I was like, dude, that is the first thing I did to that bike. But obviously, since I got rid of the catalytic converter because of racing, they don't want you to run that. I had to tune the bike and whatnot, so I had to do it all at once. But, dude, my bike is like the loudest. You could hear me from the other side of the track, and the guys know exactly where I'm at on the track. Mine is surprisingly louder than like the Ninja 400s or the R3s. Or some of the 600s or 650s. Like my bike is just loud, but I like it.
Oh yeah. I put a Yoshimura on my ZX10 the other night. My friend texted me, he said, hey, did you ever get that exhaust on and start? I said, yeah, I started it last night. You mean you didn't hear it? Well, he lives 30 miles away. You know, are you telling me you didn't hear the bike? I mean, come on. I must have bought the wrong pipe, you know?
Yes.
Is one quick question and we'll go to break. Is street bike racing much more expensive than dirt bike racing?
Astronomically, the difference between motocross to road racing is insane. So like motocross, a weekend might cost you like maybe $500, not including like hotel and whatnot, but just like the basic cost, like gas, maintenance and whatnot. Road racing, we're talking from like $1,000 to $2,000, depending on your bike size. Like it could be, your tire bill could be $1,000. I mean, alone. Yeah. So it is definitely a massive difference between one to the other.
Yeah, that's an expensive hobby. We're met at Barber Motorsports Park. I went over for super bike racing to watch that. I had never really taken the time to see that. And that is so interesting. And I that's where we met over there. Actually, you have maybe a couple of bikes or something they were tweaking there that day.
Yeah, so I had brought a Ninja 400 to Apex Manufacturing to get some custom made landing gear for my bike. And then I had actually brought my RC390 to be put on display because I was not racing that weekend. But I had another team member, Isaiah Davis, or we call him Easy, that is racing under the Bike Experience name with Alpha Omega.
I got you. Well, one thing I kind of learned talking to some seasoned people around there was at that level of racing, you're spending money. And then to get past that level, eventually you're where you're making money. Does that sound right? And the numbers you were throwing at me was pretty astronomical to really be competitive.
Oh, absolutely. And the biggest thing when you're road racing is the cost of everything. Yes, you can have the best talent, you can have the best bike, but it still costs money to race and compete at that level. And getting the support, like getting sponsors or help, to be able to make it happen is a really big deal in this.
You know what surprised me about it is the variety of motorcycles that have classes. Like, I had no idea they were still racing vintage motorcycles, and that like those Royal Enfield bikes are still being built and have like basically their own class.
Oh, absolutely. That is an amazing program. BTR is used to get newer beginner women into motorcycle racing. Even if they just do track days or they came from a different sport like motocross or flat track, they'll take them, put them on these bikes and they build them, the racers themselves, and then they race them, and get the experience and get the knowledge, and they have that support and the people backing them to give them the knowledge to learn. It is a great program.
Well, I just saw them all coming off the track and they pull into the paddock area and like the helmets coming. It's like all these beautiful women have been out there running this thing. I'm like, what the heck? And the bikes I guess the bikes are British. I mean, it was almost like stepping back in time. They look like 1950 bikes.
Oh, absolutely. And I hear a lot of them say they're since they're slower bikes that they feel vintage is what a few of my friends say.
Yes, they let me sit on a couple of them. I thought they were really cool. I don't know if they benefit from things like ABS and all the technology that the rest of them do, but they don't look like it.
Yeah, a lot of the time they'll take like the ABS and whatnot out of our race bikes, just because they actually ride smoother and you have a better time controlling the bike. But it also depends on the bike. Yeah,
I could see that. I found one of the classes interesting at the 400 class, the 400cc, and Kawasaki kind of seems to dominate that with the Ninja 400. What makes the 400 the perfect size for racing?
So a lot of it is the power to weight ratio. They're super agile. But they haven't changed too terribly much on the frame or chassis pretty much, but they've changed a lot internally in the motor, tuning the electronics, but they're super fast. So like if you compare my stock RC with a stock Ninja down a straight, the Ninja will walk away from the RC or like the R3, any of the smaller CC ones. Really? They're just super fast, super consistent, and they're reliable. Plus, there's contingency in that class and under that bike in that class. So a lot of them lean towards that because then if they get a win, they get contingency in comparison to the other bike brands.
I got you. Well, to me, if it says Ninja, it's cool.
Oh, absolutely.
I was around when Ninja launched back in '84. I remember how cool that was seeing the TV ads and stuff. Well, as I've been introducing you on the segment, I've mentioned that you're on your way to becoming the first Paralyzed racer to race in Moto America. And you mentioned you have a specialized bike that you can ride. Can you tell us how it was that you became paralyzed? Because I know it was from a motorcycle accident.
Yes. So that R1 that we had spoken about earlier, I made a very dumb decision on the street. Of course, I know we all make them. And I've learned from it, and I respect it. I was out on a group ride with some friends and I hit a light pole going 180 miles per hour. Yeah, and the bike and I hit it kind of together, and it broke quite a few bones, including my spine and my neck, in multiple places, not just in one area, in multiple places. And the final injury that they deemed it was spinal obliteration. So I'm pretty much missing a good portion of T9 in your back.
Do you remember the accident?
Oh, I was awake during the whole experience. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. And were
Yeah.
were there people that were able to stop and help you, or how long did it take the emergency people to get there?
The ambulance took roughly about 8 minutes because my friend was watching the time because I was had internal bleeding and a punctured lung that was also filling up with blood. So they were watching it because they should have airlifted me, but it took them a good minute. But luckily, one of my friends, one of my closer friends, Michael Purvis, was a respiratory therapist. So he knew where to apply pressure on my chest to be able to help hold the blood from filling in too quickly. Because it was my right lung that had collapsed, and I broke all the ribs on that side. So there was a
Oh
lot
my.
of trauma on that side. Yeah.
How long do you spend in the hospital?
Roughly about almost 7 months.
Oh my gosh. So physical therapy and I guess and
Oh, absolutely. I was transferred after about a week in the hospital locally. I was transported to the Shepherd Center in Atlanta, Georgia, to go to their spinal center of the world and was able to get the best treatment you can possibly get if for a spinal cord injury or a head injury.
so basically I guess at some point they tell you this is not something we can fix, I guess.
Yeah. So I was told laying in the bed like day one that it was a negative 20% chance of getting anything back at all.
I got you. And how long
Yeah.
is it before you're laying there thinking, because I know what I would think. I'm going to get back on a motorcycle somehow.
Well, the first week I was in denial just because of how badly, I broke everything. I was like, there's no way. But conveniently, my friend Taylor had actually um, met some people that were disabled that also, race slash rode motorcycles. And he knew exactly what we needed to do the second I got healed enough for it.
Oh,
And
wow.
well, yeah, so when he told me that, I was like, all right, let's do it. We're gonna do this. We're gonna make it happen one way or another.
Yeah, it has to happen. I mean, motorcycles are life. I mean, it's
Oh,
just part of life.
100%. You eat, breathe, live it.
Yep,
Absolutely.
absolutely you do. So tell us, there is a group called the Bike Experience, right? Where other people that have similar injuries have found ways to ride.
Absolutely. So it's a 501 program. Michael is the owner, and he actually learned about the bike experience from the UK. He was over there visiting, came across this program, and he was like, "Well, we need to input a program like that in the United States." So he came back and started this because he wanted to help other fellow riders or bike enthusiasts get back on a bike, no matter what happened to you, missing limbs, arms, legs, you're paralyzed, doesn't matter what level of paralysis you have, that you could still go out and do what you love and feel the wind on your body and just enjoy motorcycles. We have to have that little itch. We got to have our
Oh,
little
yeah.
drug addiction.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh,
And
it's
I
like
was
crack.
itching. Yes. And I had met him finally. I was still inpatient at the Shepherd Center. I met him at Atlanta, Michelin Road, Atlanta. And I was there. They had their team there racing for the N2 Endurance. And I kept nagging him. I was like, so when are you going to let me ride? When are you going to let me ride? And he, no later than a few moments, went and found gear for me to ride in. And we went up on the top hat and let me ride one of the adaptive bikes that they had there. And I cried because, dude, just the experience of just being back on a bike, despite not having legs, I felt normal. I felt like I had functioning legs again. So I wanted to help support that program even more because, more people need to have that experience like I did to be able to feel normal.
I wanted to get you to describe your motorcycle a little bit when you talk about how it's modified where you could ride. I was fascinated with your magnetic boots because it seems like something out of a Schwarzenegger movie or something. Have these cool magnet boots. Who come up with that?
So Ulla from Finland, she was the first paralyzed female ever to road race, and she was able to come up with the design of the magnetic foot pegs because a lot of people were strapping their legs to the bikes or using bicycle clips, but she had spiral fractured her leg, so she came up with the base design of the magnetic foot peg, and then over time, Taylor and I were slowly developing better and better ones just because of how much I move around on the bike personally. Now, every person's different. Sometimes they prefer the bicycle clips, like we got 2 riders on the bike experience that does. Some of them like the magnets. I prefer the magnets. I feel safer because then if I crash, I'm able to get away from the bike with nothing holding me on but, little magnets.
Right. So since you can't manipulate foot controls, how are you shifting and running the rear brake and that sort of thing?
So shifting, we actually there's a couple different models. The 2 that I have personally used was the Pingle, which is a magnetic actuator that sits on the shift shaft and then it actuates, but we kept having issues with it overheating, so we actually moved into the Translogic, and that one is a rotary actuator, and I have loved that since day one. It's consistent, it's fast, it's like a normal person hitting it with their foot. I have a lot of buddies that have ridden my bike and prefer actually using the buttons in their foot.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just so consistent. You can rely on it rather than having to move your foot from one position to the other, vice versa. But it allows me to shift the bike with ease. And then for the rear brake, depending on the riding style that you prefer, a lot of people prefer the thumb brake. And then a lot of people prefer like a stunt brake, like you would see on stunt bikes. They would have an extra handle. I prefer the stunt brake. The reason being is because I'm already having to do so much with my hands. I just want to reach for a lever. So a lot of the guys, like if you watch MotoGP, they have a brake lever and a clutch lever right on top of each other. So what they would do is use the clutch on top. And then right after the start, because they no longer need it, they actually flip it up.
Really?
It's on like it's on a little lever, and it'll actually flip up to where all they're using now is right there is the rear brake on that lower lever.
So they're not messing with a pedal on the right side.
No, not at all.
That's pretty unique. I just got my first bike with a quick shifter. So, I'm 50 years old. It is very cool, but it's very unusual for me to change gears and not pull the clutch in.
Absolutely. And I actually got in the habit of flipping the bike instead of using the clutch on the R1 just because of how hard it was to pull the clutch in on them bigger bikes.
Yeah.
And I just taught myself how to flip, and it worked beautifully. And then it helped transitioning into, road racing these littler bikes. Instead of putting the money into like an auto blipper or a quick shifter, I'm able just to blip real naturally, pretty much.
I'm hoping you are familiar with this. When I was growing up, the big thing that people were watching was Kevin Schwantz and Wayne Rainey. And of course, Wayne ended up paralyzed there in the early 90s, I think. But he just recently rode his bike again. I guess his old 2-stroke Yamaha. Have you seen the video of that?
Absolutely. I've watched it 1,000 times. Yeah. And he's the one that helped develop the Translogic shifter. That's the funny fact about that. And Wayne Rainey is such an inspiration to me to want to get back on the bike. And him being one of the presidents / owner of Moto America, I'm just super excited to represent, other disabled racers that, no matter what happens to you, you could still achieve your dreams or goals in life. You just have to put your head down and apply the throttle.
That's right. Well, how do you deal with coming to a stop? Or is there some type of a training wheel that pops down or something like that?
So we've actually been in the development. A lot of them have landing gear now, but the issue that I have with those landing gear, they're deemed a penetratable item. So like for street riding, they work beautifully, but for track or road racing, they're you can't race with them. That's the worst part. So we've actually been working on developing custom made landing gear that actually tucks up behind the rear sets of your motorcycle to where they're no longer a penetratable item. And then you hit a little button and they come down in roughly about 2 seconds, same with coming up. But as of right now at club racing and whatnot, I actually have my friends that catch and release me on the track.
Well, that works.
Absolutely.
That works. So I'm guessing in order to compete in the big racing leagues, there's probably, just like getting a pilot's license, some type of a medical sign-off. Have you been able to achieve that? Or if not, how will you get over that hump?
So, and that's something that I've been fighting currently with Moto America. So when I originally applied for my license at the beginning of the year, they approved my license and then randomly revoked it right as the season was about to begin. So I put everything on hold. I contacted, the AMA director, and he had said that my license was revoked because the medical director reviewed my information and deemed it too risky at the original, announcement. And I had talked to him a few times, and they want me to do an appeal against the medical director, which I hate having to go through that process. But I told him, I was like, I'm stubborn. I said, I will make this happen one way or another.
Right.
I'm going to make it happen, because I was like, my overall goal is to have a program like DTR there and just have a grid of maybe 5 to 10, disabled riders out there racing. That's my overall goal.
Sure.
But for me, I rather race normal people and just walk away from them,
They're scared of how fast you are. That's all it is.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Intimidated.
I sent some papers of just results from this last year, as well as my motocross results. So they said that, yes, I qualify in every necessary needed, but the issue is that I cannot walk. So I'm having to go through a process and showing them that we've developed everything to be as safe as possible, that I'm a safe and competitive racer, that I don't cause issues at the tracks. It's been a long, grueling process, but we're pretty much almost wrapped up with the appeal paperwork. So hopefully they'll give me my license back now.
Oh, yeah. You'll get there. So you keep saying a license. I think most people probably don't understand that. In order to, you don't just go out and race, right? You have to have had some sort of education and experience. How do you obtain that racing license where you can go out there and compete with people?
So just for your normal club racing, a lot of the organizations will actually have a race school that morning. So Mark Miracle here in South Georgia is the main one that does like our We Are Around ones. And you can go, doesn't matter if you've never done a track day before, they prefer it. But you can go out there and you can get your race license, and they'll teach you about the flags, about the necessary education that you need to go on to track, putting your foot out for certain situations and showing them your basic line choices. Or you can go to N2 track days or Evolve, and they'll actually have a race school there as well. So there's multiple different ways that you can go about it, but doing it with your local race series is probably the best in my opinion.
What advice do you have for a beginning rider?
Listen. The biggest thing is to listen. Take in all of the information that you can. Write it down. But listening to the racers that are around you that have been doing this, that you see that they've gotten the results, that they are fast, consistent, safe riders, or even from the person that's running the race school. Listen and applicate that information into you. And if that information doesn't work for you, find what does. Like if you're having an issue with this corner, but it's this line that this person told you to take, try a different line. But being able to have an open mind and take in information is big and key on racing motorcycles, including motocross as well. They both combine so well together, and you just have to listen.
How would people follow you online?
So I have a Facebook page. I have two of them, in fact. I have Snappy Strong, which we made when I was injured. And then we also have Cora Leonhardt Racing. And then on Instagram as well, I have Cora 88MX. But you can also find me on Google under tbex.org.
And when people spell in your name?
My first name is Cora, Cora. The last name is Leonhardt, Leonhardt.
It has been such a blessing to have you on the show, and I wish you the best of luck. I have no doubt you're going to get that racing license, get out there and kick butt.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed this.
Absolutely. You guys go have a great Saturday. We'll see you next week on Gwatney Unplugged.